There's one art skill that matters more than all others combined. And I'd bet most of you have never practiced it once. It's not rendering, not anatomy, not color theory. Those are important, but they're not the most important. And the skill I'm talking about is what separates artists who still improve steadily year over year from artists who stay stuck at the same level for a decade or more. It's what lets professional artists draw things they've never really drawn before with a high level of confidence. I'm talking about observation. And by the end of the video, I'll prove to you this is the most important skill there is. And maybe more importantly, show you exactly how to train it starting today. Let's get into it. Now, where did my pens go? First, let's define what observation actually is, because most people think they're already doing it, but they're not. Observation is not just seeing. Everyone sees things. Observation is more than that. It's seeing things and being able to extract useful information out of it. It's actually a 3-step process that your brain goes through, or should go through if you train it properly. Step 1 is recognition. Your brain just identifies what it's looking at. Like, this is a face. Okay, everybody gets this far. Step 2 is the analysis. Your brain will break down the components and the relationships, like the eye's position at this distance relative to each other, like the nose maybe it has a specific width compared to the spacing in between the eyes, and most people will skip this step, a lot of artists included. But this is where most of the actual learning happens. And then you have step 3, which is the encoding phase. Basically, the brain will store this analyzed information in a way that you can recall and use at a later time. This is like your visual library, building up. And well, if you skip step 2, this specific step has nothing valuable to store. And this matters a lot when your visual library is pretty much everything as an artist. It's your mental database of forms, proportions, like how things move, how lights work, how materials behave. Because like I've said in the past, when you draw from imagination, you're not actually doing that literally. You're instead pulling from your visual library. But if you have a weak visual library, you have nothing to pull from. It gets incredibly harder to create new things. Instead, you're always sort of bound to using references. And if you're not using references and you don't have a solid visual library, well, you'll just keep drawing the same generic faces at the same angles because that's all you've stored. And then meanwhile, artists with strong visual libraries can draw pretty much anything because they've observed and stored the thousands of different examples. So why is observation the most important skill? Well, it's because it's the foundation that all your other skills are built on. You can't draw accurate proportions if you can't observe proportions. You can't paint realistic lighting if you can't observe how light actually behaves. And then you won't be able to create believable anatomy if you can't observe the human form correctly. Every single technical skill depends on observation first. And the reason I'm dedicating an entire class on this topic is pretty simple. It's not only the most important art skill, it's also the most powerful one. Because you can sit in a chair all day, not draw a single line. But if you're observing well, you'll still improve faster than someone grinding out sketches all day long for hours, but with poor observation skills. Like, I personally go 1 to 2 weeks without drawing relatively often. Life happens, but it's not like I'm not doing anything during that time. When I don't have time to draw, I instead spend the time observing the world around me, like studying references with intention, watching how people move. And then when I pick up the pen again, I've leveled up, like, significantly. A lot of the things that I couldn't really draw that well before now suddenly start to click because my brain just processed and like stored that information while I was just observing. Leonardo da Vinci was actually pretty famous for this. Like, he would just sit in public spaces and like just stare at people going by. Not drawing, just observing people's proportions, how they carried themselves, like their expressions, that kind of stuff. He was just filling his visual library. And that's why he could create masterpieces with that level of life and detail to them. And that's also why artists plateau in general. Like, they'll be drawing the same things over and over again, but never adding new information to their visual library. They're practicing with poor observation, which means they're just reinforcing their mistakes, like training themselves really well to draw things very incorrectly. Now, obviously, you need manual practice too. I'm not saying to never draw, but if your observation skill is weak, your practice becomes inefficient. And if your observation skill is strong, every minute of practice becomes exponentially more valuable because you're actually seeing and correcting mistakes as you work. All right, now, how do you actually get good at this stuff? Well, I'm going to give you 3 practical ways to start training the most important art skill there is, and you can start doing that today. The first one is to observe with purpose and need. Your brain just won't store information it doesn't need. If you're just passively looking at random stuff all day, nothing will stick. It's like having a boring conversation with someone. Like, you're not going to remember any of it tomorrow. So you need to observe things you currently need to understand. If you're working on anatomy, for example, observe anatomy. If you're learning perspective, observe how buildings recede into space. If you're studying faces, observe real faces in motion. Like, your need will make the information sticky. Without need, the information gets discarded. So always connect your observation practice to what you're actively learning. That makes it relevant, which makes it memorable. The second is knowledge multiplies observation. Here's where it gets powerful. The more you know about a subject, the more you can observe about it. Kind of makes sense, right? Knowledge and observation compound each other. If you know nothing about anatomy, you look at a pose and think, looks fine, maybe. But if you studied anatomy even a little bit, suddenly you can see that the shoulder is positioned wrong, the rib cage is tilted incorrectly perhaps, or the weight distribution doesn't make sense. It's the same image, but more information is extracted because you had the knowledge to recognize what you're looking at properly. This is why studying theory isn't separate from observation. They work together. Learn about how muscles attach, and then observe real bodies and you'll see those principles in action. Learn about perspective rules, then observe environments and you'll see those rules everywhere. It's a snowball effect, so the more you learn, the more you can observe. And the more you observe, the more context you have for future learning. They feed each other. And then third, practice mindful observation. So this is the game changer and something that I've been doing almost every day for over like 20 years now, and I highly recommend you start doing that today. So throughout the day, I'll set aside a total of just like maybe 5 to 10 minutes, a total, where you do nothing but observe. Like no phone, no distractions, no drawing, just stare at the damn thing. Pure observation. So pick a subject that you're currently studying and what you have knowledge about, then just look at it. Like really look at it, as if you had only a couple of minutes to look at it before it disappeared completely and you had to draw it from memory. So examine every detail. How does the light hit different surfaces? What makes this form feel solid? Like after a couple of minutes of this, you start to enter a flow state. Time starts flying by a little differently, and in that state, your brain is absorbing information at an accelerated rate. You're not just passively seeing anymore. You're actively processing and storing. Now, like I said, knowledge multiplies observation, but it can be pretty tricky for most artists to know exactly what to study and in what order to maximize their potential. Like I have a ton of videos on the channel going over all sorts of topics, but usually on YouTube, the structure is what is lacking, which is why I've built my art program over the last 8 years. It's structured like a bachelor's degree in art, but focused on digital work, and observation training is baked into every lesson. We've got nearly 30,000 students now, and the feedback has been incredible. If you felt like you needed guidance in your art studies, but you never really had it, check the link in the description for all the details on the program. The Halloween sale is actually going for a couple of more days, so make sure you take advantage of the huge discount before the price goes back up. Check down below to know exactly when the sale ends. I don't want you to miss out on this. Alright, look, I know this whole observation thing might seem a little counterintuitive for a lot of people. Most artists just never learn this stuff. We've all been told that practice makes perfect and to just draw more, and practice is important, but the truth is you can't draw what you can't see. And if you can't observe well, you can't see well. It's that simple. So this is why some people will take 10 years to reach professional level while others might be able to reach it in 3. It's not talent, it's not grinding harder. It's that some people naturally observe better, or they just figured out early on that observation is also a trainable skill like any other, which ends up accelerating everything else. The artist who succeed isn't the one who draws more, they're the ones who see the most. They're the ones that can look at a reference for like 30 seconds and be able to extract more information out of it than someone who spends like 5 to 10 minutes looking at the same thing. That efficiency compounds every month, every years into a massive advantage. Every technical skill you want to master, anatomy, perspective, color, composition, all of them depend on observation. Master observation and everything else becomes easier. Ignore observation and you'll struggle with everything else, no matter how much you practice. That's why it's the most important skill. Not the flashiest, not the most exciting to talk about, certainly, but the most important. It's the foundation everything else is built on. And I think a good follow-up on learning about observation would be to learn about the second most important skill, and the third, and the fourth. And you're in luck because I put together a full guide going over every art skill and in which order to tackle them for max results. The link to that class will be up on screen in a second. I'll see you there.